Yo, yo, yo. What's up, guys? Joe Idoni at Tour Picks on Twitter here on behalf of the Tour Junkies to provide to you this week's preview and picks show for, I believe, the ninth. Yeah, the ninth live tournament of the year, maybe 10th. But we're getting pretty close to the end of the season here. Only a few left before we get to the championship, which coincidentally has been switched from Saudi Arabia back to Miami. So they made that announcement a few weeks ago. But the last two events obviously were in Valderrama and London. So they have made their way back stateside, and we're on our way back to West Virginia. A breathtaking resort at the Greenbrier, country roads, the Blue Ridge Mountain. Take me home. They got a casino. They've got a ton of history at this place. They have it all. Just some quick sort of history on the property before we sort of get into the golf course. So, it's a very historic property. It was in an arrangement with the U.S. government for quite a long time. Over half of the U.S. presidents have spent significant time on property. Sort of the course got its name of the Old White, which was from the old sort of hotel that was on property and was often called sort of the Summer White House because it's where many of the U.S. presidents made their stay during the summer times. President Eisenhower actually developed an underground bunker system within the president's wing of the resort. That was sort of a top secret location for U.S. presidents and Congress to go if we were ever in threat of nuclear war or any sort of target on D.C. This was the location that they were designated to go to. It's now actually open to the public, and it's pretty cool if you ever get the chance to go see it. And they recently sort of just opened up information and started letting people in after the U.S. government ended its lease agreement. So the bunker was constructed in 1958. It was built on the hillside, basically under the Greenbrier. Once completed, the facility in 1961 was maintained for over 50 years by a small group of government employees that were posing as like audio and visual techs at the Greenbrier Resort, but really they were just in charge of maintaining this property. It's got like 50-pound pressure blast doors, decontamination chambers, 18 dormitories that can accommodate up to 1,100 people. This is all underground. A power plant with purification equipment with up to 25,000-gallon water tanks, communications area, clinic. Basically, it had a medical hospital inside of this bunker in case anyone were to get hurt. Laboratory, pharmacy, intensive care unit, cafeterias, meeting rooms for Senate and Congress. It was all really cool, and kind of some of the history of this great resort at White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. So the Old White, let's talk about the golf course now. The course, obviously, I mentioned before, was named after the massive Old White Hotel, which was on site on property from 1858 to 1922. If you look up the Greenbrier Resort now, you will still see a white hotel. It's more of a resorty feel, beautiful establishment. If you ever get the chance to go there with family, make sure that you absolutely check it out. So Charles McDonald, old school, like American golf architecture design with consultation from Seth Rayner, who was also coincidentally in charge of the property restorations and renovations that have taken place since then. Most notably, like the main thing that many people are going to talk about is this golf course and entire property was nearly destroyed in 2016 due to a massive flood. The PGA Tour annual event that is held there was not held that year. They basically had to reconstruct the golf course from scratch as the entire greens were completely moved and shifted out of location, and extensive damage was done. But the kind of the initial idea behind this golf course that McDonald had is he wanted to essentially mimic some of the great European golf courses and try to implement them and take specific holes from those golf courses that he loves and reimagine and design them here in the middle of West Virginia. So the eighth hole, which is a par 3, is made to sort of mimic the famous Redan at North Berwick. The 15th is a par 5 that will look very much like the Eden, which is the name of the par 5 on the back 9 at St. Andrews. There's another hole there that I think he got from the Prestwick. So a number of holes where he kind of took inspiration from some of the European courses. As I mentioned, Seth Rayner was a consult and oversaw many of the updates during the 1920s. The course hosted either what was known as the Greenbrier Classic or a military tribute at the Greenbrier, which was an annual PGA Tour stop from 2010 to 2019. Here are some of those champions, just to get you an idea of sort of maybe some of the skill set that this place asks of a player. So Stuart Appleby won in 2010. Scott Stallings in 2011, Ted Potter Jr. in 2012, Jonas Blix 2013, Angel Cabrera 2014, Danny Lee 2015, Xander Schauffele won in 2017 after the year layover from the floods, Kevin Na 2018, Joaquin Niemann 2019. You'll notice 3 of the last 4 winners will be in the field for the LIV event this week in Niemann, Na, and Danny Lee. So it is a par 70. Traditional par 34 on the front and a 36 on the back, which accommodates both of the par 5s. 7,255 yards is what the yardage is this week on the LIV Golf Media website. Some notes about the course. So it's actually a place where we've seen 259s, and it's pretty impressive that we've seen those low scores. Obviously, you see those typically on a par 70, but the scoring average is not like overwhelmingly easy here. It's typically close to even par for the field, and in many years played slightly over par. Some notable holes. So I mentioned the par 5 12th is modeled after the St. Andrews hole, is a gettable par 5, number 10. The back 9 is where this sort of thing really ratchets up a lot of the interest level. So number 10 is a 354-yard par 4. I have word that LIV does have intentions to play that up one day as a drivable par 4, which is going to probably be around 309 to 315 yards from the upward tee. I would imagine, I think from an excitement standpoint, they bring that into play on Sunday as the final day, but I think it's absolutely something that we will see on the weekend. Number 16, so 16 through 18 is probably the toughest stretch on the course. Now, 16 is a 507-yard par 4, the longest and most difficult from a scoring standpoint hole on the entire course. It is tough. That said, it can be moved up as well. And I think that they may do this also one day. There's an upward tee that plays around 420 yards. So it depending, they want scoring, right? They want scoring, and especially with those final groups who will be teeing off of 1 and 2 on the final day. I think that this sort of opens it up, and we may see that play a little bit easier. Number 17 is the other par 5. So the last time the PGA Tour held an event here, it measured at almost 620 yards. It's an interesting par 5 where, even though it's really long, you do see a good fair share of birdies. It is a wide open fairway, but if you miss, the rough is deep. It is hard. You can make bogeys. We've seen doubles on this hole. It reminds me, without a water hazard, but in a similar fashion to the closing hole that we saw most recently at the 3M Open, where if you hit a good tee shot, you are in position to potentially make eagle. You have a relatively easy birdie opportunity, but you hit one bad shot and double bogey is into play. This is really sort of what I would consider a good risk reward, difficult but scoreable par 5, and is one of the closing 2 holes I think should make for an exciting finish. And then number 18, the most famous hole on the course, most notable because it is rare that you see a par 3 and the shortest hole on the golf course be the final hole on the golf course. It plays around 175 to 180 yards. So it used to have this giant ridge in the middle of it where it would just basically funnel balls either to the back or the front of the green. During the most recent restoration after the floods, they sort of changed up this design, and it is now kind of like one of those thumbprint greens where the middle is, it kind of feeds everything to the center of the green. So the outer edges and the back edge are sort of heavily contoured to slope inward to the middle. So depending on where they place the pins, it can be very difficult. It can also be like an exciting pin where there are definitive hole-in-one opportunities because there are a lot of spots that funnel to a similar place on the green. And if they want to really ratchet up the excitement on the last hole, I think that could be very fun. Some things from an agronomy standpoint. So bent grass fairways wider than you will typically see on a par 70 course, kind of a resorty feel, I'll call it. 36 yards wide on average. I mean, it is a resort, so you have that aspect to it. They want to make it playable for people coming there to visit on vacation. So definitely wider than average fairways, which should present some opportunities. I'll talk a little bit later for the Bombers. So 3-inch Kentucky bluegrass rough, typical that we see this kind of setup in the Midwest. The greens are 7,000 square feet on average, pure bent grass greens. Ranked 27th out of 49 courses during its time as a PGA Tour stop. So middle of the road in terms of difficulty. Now, what I was mentioning earlier, typically when you get a par 70, you're talking about a short golf course. You're talking about narrow. I think about something like Colonial or TPC Southwind or River Highlands or even like a heritage type setup that have these dog legs and narrow fairways that oftentimes will incentivize a player to potentially club down off the tee and really make sure that they're in the short grass. This really isn't that. 35-yard wide fairways, even at the 300-yard mark, seemingly presents an advantage to longer players and gives a little bit of wiggle room for those that may be inaccurate drivers off the tee. Now, what's the defense of this golf course? Obviously, somewhat weather dependent. If it gets gnarly, it's going to play tougher. But the main defense year after year has been the bunkers. So they were also re-engineered and basically pushed closer into the greens. So they're more in play if you have a relatively small miss coming into the greens. During the most recent renovation, they presented difficult challenges to the players. One of the more difficult up and down out of a sand trap courses that we saw on the stops during its time, especially in the later years on the PGA Tour. You end up in the sand and you're going to make your fair share of bogeys. So notable connections in the field to links sort of to the Greenbrier over the years. As I mentioned, 3 of the last 4 winners when this was a PGA Tour event are now on the LIV Tour. Danny Lee 2015, Kevin Na 2018, Joaquin Niemann in 2019. Here's a quote that I saw and I looked up and saw from Danny Lee on what he thought of the golf course. So, quote, "For some reason, I just read the greens really nicely here. I feel like everywhere on the green, I can make every putt. So all I was trying to do was hit the fairway, just trying somehow to get it on the green and give it my best chance with the putter. I think this course really suits my game." Some other connections. Phil Mickelson was like the tour's ambassador for the Greenbrier for a long time. He was actually a partner in the design company that handled the renovation of the course. So he had input on some of the reallocations of how the golf course was set to play. At one time, had a place on or near the property. Also, Bubba Watson bought a house here. So him and his family actually lived in a beautiful house just outside of the resort. And they were there during the 2016 floods. Bubba described it as one of sort of the scarier things that him and his wife have ever been through. They saw the devastation firsthand, and they actually contributed heavily to some of the relief. They donated over $250,000. They were literally delivering people food and water out of their vehicle, driving it into town to the people because there was no power for quite a long time. They recently in 2021 sold that property, which is now actually owned by the governor's son. So they do not no longer live there, but he certainly has an affinity for the area, certainly has a close connection with the golf course. So 7 winners on the LIV Tour this season. 6 of them have played in a PGA Tour tournament here when they had it at the Greenbrier. Cameron Young, Dustin Johnson, Taylor Gooch, Danny Lee, Charles Howe, and Harold Varner III all played in those tournaments. The only player that has won a LIV event this season who has yet to play an event at the Greenbrier would be Brooks Koepka. Some individual standing stuff for this year I just wanted to touch on real quick. Taylor Gooch is obviously in first place with his 3 victories. He's got 137 total points. We're just starting to wind down the season, so you want to kind of keep tabs on this as obviously the payday is massive, and I think will provide some added incentive down the stretch for some of these players. Cameron Smith, with his most recent win, obviously in London, and a second in Tulsa, another top 5 at Adelaide, sixth at Mayakoba. He's in second place at 130. So, despite only having one win versus 3, he's actually very close and could potentially overtake Taylor Gooch this week. Brooks Koepka's in third, 112 points. He's pretty far back. And in fourth is actually Patrick Reed. So Patrick Reed has not, besides London, he was kind of there, but it's yet really, I would say that you tune into a broadcast late and you think that he's really going to win. That said, he's got 4 top 5s this season, most notably both events over on the European Tour swing. And then DJ is in 5th place. Excuse me. All right, let's pull up the odds board. So we talked about the golf course. Here's who we got this week from sort of a betting perspective. So Cam is the favorite. Let me zoom in here just a little bit since you're checking this out on YouTube so that you can kind of follow along. So Cam is 9-1 at Bet365. Brooks is 11-1. Bryson 14-1. DJ 14. Reed 14. Neiman and Gooch at 16. I didn't take anyone here for a couple of reasons. There's been a little bit of a layover. None of these guys were that impressive to me, especially at the top at the Open Championship. I believe Cam Smith probably finished the best, but even so, it never really felt like any of these guys made a real run, and many of them missed the cut. Brooks was never really there. DJ missed the cut. Neiman, Gooch, these players. Neiman obviously has the victory, but the one thing with Joaquin Neiman, he's been really bad. He just doesn't seem to have the same. I'm hesitant to call it motivation and want, but something is clearly lacking right now for him. And maybe it's just a swing mechanics thing, but it just feels like it's not all there and he's not 100% plugged into these events to the point where I feel like he can come here and repeat. He also recently, I believe, just got engaged. A lot of things exteriorly happening for Joaquin Neiman in his world right now. I think Patrick Reed is decent, but I'm not willing to go there at 14-1 just yet. Bryson, I was very intrigued by, given the width of the fairways. I think this place could really set up well for Bryson. But 14-1, I just feel this is a golf course, and people have talked about it over the years. When you see Ted Potter Jr. and Kevin Na and these types of players, Scott Stallings, just it really opens up a lot of the field, I think, at this event to guys in that next tier who are playing reasonably well, who only have to beat these guys for 54 holes on a golf course where they're not going to feel at a severe disadvantage off the tee or from an iron standpoint because they're big greens, they're big fairways. Ultimately, I think this turns into a putting contest, which it had many times on the PGA Tour. And anytime it's a putting contest in 54 holes, a little bit of less variance there sort of sprinkled in, I think that anyone can essentially win. Gooch is the interesting one. I haven't done it yet, but I'm considering Taylor Gooch at 16-1. He's made more money than any player on tour this season. He's Taylor Gooch. I tweeted this out maybe a week ago. To give some reference, John Rahm has made about $180,000 per round of golf this year. Insane number. Scotty Scheffler having one of the all-time years from a consistency standpoint on the PGA Tour when the purses are higher than they've ever been before, has made around $220,000 per round. Taylor Gooch is making $500,000 per round played. It's staggering the amount of money that he's made this year. I think that when a lot of guys look at a limited schedule and playing 27 rounds thus far this season and making $500,000 per round, I honestly think this offseason, with everything that's going on right now, especially with the merger and the acquisition, we could see a few more names sort of jump over. I know we really didn't get it this offseason like we had expected to. I think there's less backlash than ever now. It would not surprise me if a few players jump over. And on the contrary, I saw John Rahm talk about this. Um, I don't think anyone leaves live. I could be wrong about that, but they all seem very happy and content with the decisions that they've made. I don't know the repercussions within the contracts that they signed, but if the PGA Tour says, here's a $1 million fine and you're back on the PGA Tour, I don't think there's a lot of guys that take that deal. I think many of them are happy right where they're at with the ability to still play in major championships. I would love with the merger to see some sort of reimagination of the tour championship where maybe if there's 30 guys, maybe we get 5 live guys in there and it becomes sort of a world golf championship playoffs finale. I think that would be a great idea for both tours to capitalize on narratives, to capitalize on eyeballs, especially if it was a match play format. I mean, imagine getting Cam and Rory again. Imagine getting Brooks and Scotty Scheffler. I just think it would create a ton of intrigue and interest from very casual fans who at this point have no idea how the FedEx Cup works. They have no idea the Tour Championship is this staggered, weird starting format. Just an idea that I kind of wanted to throw out there. Moving down the odds board, here's where it starts for me. So Sebastian Munoz, there are 22s. I believe there's 26 to 1 at Circa. I like that number a lot. He's been first round leader here. He has a great history at the Greenbrier. But the other guy that I took at 22 to 1 is Harold Varner. So he's been very quietly very good. His last 5 live tournaments, he has 4 top 12 finishes, including a win at LIV Golf DC, which I think of the recent tournaments in live, I think that that's the best comp to Greenbrier, in my opinion. Similar Midwest agronomy in terms of greens, in terms of fairways, similar in terms of course layout in many aspects to be. Has played this event actually 3 times during his time on the PGA Tour, and they were all top 30 finishes. His best was a 5th place finish here in 2018. In the 3 starts during his time on the PGA Tour, he gained over 6.5 strokes on the field per start. Harold's playing well. Harold likes this place. I'm okay at 22 to 1 or even a 20, I think, on HV3. In my opinion, is probably the best value bet from these guys that are sort of your range of quote unquote favorites. Interesting number on Mito Pereira this week. He rates out really well in a lot of the statistical categories that Liv has in terms of driving, in terms of greens and regulations. A lot of that is fairly limited, but from the information that we do have available, he seems to check a lot of boxes. I'm not quite there. Sergio at 26 to 1, Kokrak 29, Grace 30, Usti 30, Kevin Na 31. Henrik Stenson. So there are 40 to 1s out there for Henrik Stenson. I realize that this shows 33 to 1, but he is going to be my next pick. Top 5 at Live DC and a top 6 at London were by far his biggest signs of life that we've seen since really his win a year and a half ago on the Live Tour. He also finished 13th at the Open Championship, which I mentioned how a lot of the guys struggled there. He probably had the most impressive week of anyone at Royal Liverpool. Was actually quite impressed with his ball striking and iron play. He gained 6.19 strokes on approach at Royal Liverpool. He is leading the Live Tour in fairways right now in terms of percentage of fairways hit for the season. And he's hitting 70% of greens and regulations, which is top 10. I mentioned that I think distance could have some importance this week, but the problem with this place, and if you get really offline, the rough is penal. The rough presents problems in terms of angles, and making birdies from the rough is difficult. And I do feel like you're going to need to make a lot of birdies at only a par 70 golf course over the course of 3 rounds to compete. You can't make bogeys. I think Henrik is positioned well in terms of he can hit a ton of fairways. His iron play has been fantastic. Kind of like the quote that Danny Lee said, find the fairway, find the green, make some putts. Like, that's the formula. You can't play from the rough consistently here and score, even though the fairways are wider. You miss big, you're in trouble. Moving down the board a little bit, Peters and Answer in this 35 range, Uline 35, Lahiri. I don't have a lot of interest in any of these guys. I'll stop at a couple of old guys that I kind of don't mind. Bubba Watson's 80-1. I didn't take Bubba. I was close. He loves this golf course. I think of all players, when this event sort of signed at the Greenbrier, he was probably the most excited for it. I just haven't seen a real sign of life. I'm still worried that there are some issues from the injury that are lingering. But the next pick is Yikes City, but I took 140-1 on Phil. His results this year on LIV have been awful, but he has shown signs. Obviously, the finish at the Masters was incredible. He has a ton of history here. Now, is it great? No, but I think that he understands the test that this golf course is going to give him. And maybe there's a situation where he has a plan. We've seen resurgence from players on LIV that came out of nowhere. Stenson, Howell, these guys that just sort of pop up and you're like, I didn't really know that they played a whole ton of competitive golf anymore. And here they are. If Phil's gonna win one on LIV, this is the spot. He had consulted on the renovation here. He's played this course so many times. It's wide off the tee. It's forgiving. It should set up for his skill set as well as any stop thus far on LIV has set up for him. You know, he made a lot of birdies at the Open Championship, but he followed that up with bogeys. His putting has just been terrible, which is my main concern. But he's 140-1. Look, it's worth a little flyer there. I don't mind it. Yeah, those are my picks right now. So obviously, I have Varner, Stenson, Phil. My last pick is going to be between Gooch and Munoz. I will do my best to sort of put that in the Tour Junkies Nut Hut Discord and potentially tweet it out before this event kicks off on Friday. I hope that you enjoyed this sort of course preview. I'm from West Virginia. I was born in West Virginia. I was raised there until I was 7 years old. So I have some excitement to see a tournament come back to this place, a place that is a great golf course with a ton of rich history in not only both the golf, but the culture of America. So excited to sort of see this place back on TV after a little bit of a hiatus. See the backdrop of the Blue Ridge Mountains. It's just going to be sort of incredible. And one of the events on the LIV Tour that I've been looking forward to since the schedule is announced. Best of luck to you this week. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at Tour Picks. Make sure to sign up for the Nut Hut. It's like $20 a month. You're going to get all my exclusive matchup and props picks. You've got the research center. You've got DB's picks, Pat's picks. There are a lot of tools in there and people that are kind and willing to help you if you're relatively new to fantasy golf or betting on golf or just want some additional incentive in terms of rooting interest. It's a great place to be. It's the place to be. Make sure to like and comment on the video below if you enjoyed this and you want us to keep providing this sort of LIV golf content for you exclusively here on the Tour Junkies channel. My name is Joe Idoni. I hope that you all have a great week. I'm out of here. Peace.